Hello! I'm so excited that you're here and that you're interested in learning more about my work. Today I'm going to be walking through the process video of one of my most recent illustrations. This video kind of provides an overview of my painting process and also gives lots of insights into the steps that I take to create a finished digital illustration. This video is an example of the types of videos that are available in my Patreon packages, but by no means is this a strict one-to-one comparison because I want to focus on new tips and tutorials every month, so each month you'll be getting new information and you won't just be receiving the same information every time. So if you end up liking this video and want some really cool monthly art goodies, come and join my community on Patreon. Or if you just like my art and want to support the creation of more art, that's also a great reason to join my Patreon. Either way, I hope you enjoy this guided walkthrough. So let's get started. So I generally start with a sketching phase, just sketching rough ideas, and that jumping off point can come from pretty much anywhere. For this piece in particular, I knew I wanted to do something underwater themed, so of course I started with a mermaid because mermaids are like my favorite. I start with really loose sketches, trying to figure out what I wanted her pose to look like for the piece. And I want to give the disclaimer that sometimes this phase takes longer, sometimes not. It's really dependent on how clear a vision I have going into a piece and also how well I can actually execute on that vision. Meaning, sometimes I'll have an idea in my head and I'm super excited about it, and then I'll start drawing it and it just doesn't work out for whatever reason. For this piece, I actually started fleshing out this idea. You'll see in the next few sketches that I start kind of creating more concrete drawings versus those first 4 sketches were really loose and rough. And as I start honing in on an idea, I'll start cleaning up more and more. Also, as a disclaimer, outside of what's going on the screen, I have a dog on my lap who's taking a nap, and she's prone to snorting and grunting while she sleeps. So if you hear some of that background noise, that's what it is. But I don't have the heart to kick her off of my lap, so. Alrighty, so now I think, yeah, so this is the final sketch that I started heading into. Initially, I had her leaning on like the ledge of a rock that was hanging out into the water. And I kind of played with this for a little while, but then decided that I wanted to show more of her tail and her body in the final image, and didn't want to have to change the framing on her upper body. So I changed her pose and I changed her surroundings. So she ends up lying on like a sloped rock that goes underwater, and we'll see that pop up in a few minutes when I make that change. And even at this point, I start getting a more clear idea of what I want, and you'll see that I change it one more time before heading into the final illustration. And I think that's a really good thing to do, to keep editing your work and keep assessing how well you're accomplishing what you want to with your composition and with your illustration. It makes your work really, really strong when you can self-critique and just fix little things that make the illustration stronger. Perfect. And so now I'm heading into the pre-painting process. When I illustrate, I like to lay down kind of like a quick color vision for what I want the final illustration to look like. And I like this because it kind of gives me a roadmap to refer to as I paint. I really like figuring out kind of the vision that I have for the final piece well in advance. And then, of course, sometimes I might change direction later on and still go in a different way than what I lay down with the pre-painting process, but I think it's important to start figuring out this stuff in advance, at least for me, because some illustrators, they can just go straight into a painting and they know exactly how it's going to look, but for me, I'm really particular and I feel like I struggle a little bit when it comes to lighting still. So I really like to take the time to get the lighting right and to get the colors right before I go in to the final. And now I'm starting to make the final sketch. This part of the process varies a little bit. Sometimes I'll create the final sketch first and then do the quick color thumbnail underneath. This time I think I was just really excited because I had a color vision for the piece, and so I ended up laying down the color thumbnail underneath that really rough sketch. But for this, it doesn't matter too much. What's important for the color thumbnail is that you're just roughly laying down what you want the color and lighting to look like, so having a final sketch or not doesn't really change that outcome. And with this final sketch, I'm still even tweaking a little bit the anatomy and the layout of her body on the rocks, just making those final little changes so that the finished illustration ends up looking really, really close to the final sketch. Again, just figuring out all of those little details in advance makes the whole painting process a lot more comfortable for me. I would suggest that you try that and see if that helps improve your own work. I think I spend the most amount of time on the hair. No matter what I illustrate, I end up spending the most amount of time on the hair just because the hair, I love drawing hair. I just love hair so much. And it's really important to me to get it right because it's something that I really love. So I do take a little extra time to lay out the hairs exactly right. So here, this is a really cool Photoshop tip that I've been using a lot lately. What I'm doing is laying down the color, just a flat color, on a new layer underneath the lines. And what I'm going to do after I lay down all of this color, I'm going to create a clipping mask. So her entire body, all of the colors are going to be clipped into one layer. For her hair, you'll notice I'm using a different color just to differentiate. That's going to be clipped into a different clipping mask. And if you don't know how to use clipping masks yet, it's super easy. Just make a new layer underneath your lines, fill that layer with whatever color you want. It doesn't really matter because I end up changing it later anyways. Then above that color layer, make a new layer, right click and select clipping mask, or you can click the mask icon at the bottom of the layers window in Photoshop. And then if you're working in Procreate, you just select the new layer above your color layer, and there's an option to create a clipping mask that way too. If you open the Photoshop file that I provided in the goodie package, you'll see how I organize these clipping mask layers as well. And then after going through and setting up all those layers, I start adding base colors. So these are just flat colors. So I'll usually start with skin color on a separate layer. I'll put like her eyes, eyebrows, lips, all of the face features on another layer. I really like to lay down flat colors in advance before I add lighting. That's more a personal preference. It just takes some figuring out your own painting process, what's the most comfortable for you. And as I'm rendering, I tend to kind of hop around to render different pieces as I'm painting. Otherwise, I feel like I kind of get bored rendering out one single area, and I think it's good to kind of bring everything up to the same level of finish, a piece at a time, versus like, okay, I'm going to render her entire face, and then I'm going to paint her entire arm. I think it just makes your painting look more natural in the end. And of course, again, a preference thing. So if you like it, use it. If you don't, don't. And I'd also like to point out that at this point, we're almost halfway through the video, and I'm just now starting to actually paint. The beginning, first half of the video has been sketches, laying down flat colors, figuring out my lighting, figuring out how I want to color. Um, so maybe just take note of that I do a lot of pre-planning before heading into the actual painting, and that I think really contributes to whether or not I'll be successful in an illustration. I think it really helps to just figure out a lot of the logistics of your painting before actually doing the thing. And at this point, probably through about minute 16 and 30 seconds, all the changes are really, really small, really minute. Even I'm having a really hard time catching all of the little bits and pieces that I'm painting right now. But I didn't want to speed it up because I want you guys to be able to scrub through and see how all of those little changes add up and really come together So if you're interested, you can start scrubbing through right now to about minute 16:30, and then you'll be able to see bigger changes as I'm finishing out the illustration. Cool. If you've been scrubbing through, welcome back. Uh, you may have noticed that I've started painting on top of the line work. After I've laid down all of my colors, laid down my general lighting, that's when I'll start making layers above the line work and start painting onto those. You can reference that as well in the Photoshop file that I provided in the goodie package. And it kind of gives an overview of how I organize those layers and how I begin to flesh out the final stages of the painting. And even with painting over the lines, I really like leaving some line work. That's just kind of a personal preference, or maybe it's a style thing, or I don't know. I just really like playing with a mix of line work and painting. Because I really value strong draftsmanships, and a lot of the artists that I really love are really strong draftsmen. But I also really love rendering and illustration, and so for me, playing with a mix of both is really fun and something that I like to incorporate into my work. So much hair. So much hair rendering. But hey, If you guys like hair, I encourage you to draw hair. If you like unicorns, I encourage you to draw lots of unicorns. I think when we're able to do art and when we spend this much time honing our skills, we deserve to draw what we love. So I encourage that. It's my Kim personal life tip. Now you'll notice that I'm starting to add little the little sparkle details. There's the details that you plan in advance, and then like the lighting and luminance on the scales. That's like the sparkle details. That's the fun stuff that really gives that painting the final dose of magic or the final sparkle factor. I love adding that kind of stuff as well. And fish are sparkly. Like you see a fish in light and it's so sparkly. So I feel like mermaids should be sparkly too. They deserve to be sparkly. At this point, it looks like I've had my fun, so now I'm going in to do the last little pieces of the rest of the illustration. The rocks. And I don't add nearly as much detail onto like the rocks in the background. The background itself stays pretty much the same throughout the whole thing, very rough and loose, because you want to leave the highest level of detail where you want people to focus. So her face and her fishtail, and a little bit on her hair. That's where I spent most of my time painting detail, and then leaving the rocks to last, just giving an indication of lighting and how the water is affecting those rocks is perfect. Just because I don't want the detail on the rocks to detract from the mermaid herself. And as we're coming up on the end of the illustration, I'm really just adding final little details. There's some like that luminance that you get from water ripples that I'm adding to her skin, hopping around and just cleaning up any last little bits that I think need to be cleaned up on her body, last little details in the water. This is really kind of the finishing stage. Add more glow to the tail because obviously mermaid's gotta be glowy. The luminance in the eyes, just really bringing that focus back into her eyes. And then just a little bit of cleanup in the background. And as you guys are watching this video, I hope that if you have any questions come up or feedback, or it makes you think, oh, I would also like to learn more about this thing, please send me an email or even a message on Instagram. I really like getting feedback from people about how I can improve and especially how I can make these Patreon packages better and more informative. So always, always, always feel free to reach out. I love hearing from you guys about how I can improve my offering for you. And with that, I think we're just about wrapped. So I hope you enjoyed this, and I hope you enjoy the rest of the package, and I hope you'll consider joining my community on Patreon. Thank you guys so much. Have a great day.